Hello! I'm Nicola from A Handcrafted Business, and I'm here today to talk to you about GDPR. And if you're wondering what the heck is it, or you're panicking about what it is that you need to do, you're in the right place. So, first of all, don't panic. I'm seeing so much hoo-ha and, well, panic out there about this, that's the reason I've created this group and I've put together this checklist. Okay, so we'll go through that in a second. My mission here is to make this as simple as possible. We don't have time within our businesses to necessarily implement everything that all the big guys, that all the big businesses have to do, and we don't actually need to comply. So I'm here to tell you what it is that you do need to do, and there's no negotiating on this. We have to do this. You do have to comply with GDPR. So you do have to put some work and effort in, but let's make it all as simple as possible. No, should we just get started and cut out the waffle? Okay, so in this group there is a file for you to download. Hopefully there's a link below or somewhere really close that you can find it. So GDPR Basics for Creative Businesses. I've put this together because I've seen so many different questions and so many different ways of handling this. And well, to be honest, it's all just all over the place. So let's get it sorted, shall we? Let's get it done and dusted. So, the first thing I've put on here is, do you need to comply with GDPR? And the simple answer is yes. If you sell your products anywhere online, even if at craft fairs you use a card machine, you need to comply with the GDPR because you are collecting data. You are using processors for your data. We'll come to that in a minute. Don't panic. Okay, so you will need to do this. The only possible exception that I can think of is if you go to events and craft fairs and deal with cash only. So you're not collecting any information from your customers. The second that you start to collect information from customers or subscribers for email lists, you fall into GDPR, the data protection. Okay, so on here, it also tells you that the data controller is responsible for all the data collected, so that anybody who collects data, which is you in your business, is a data controller. That means you are responsible under GDPR for making sure that this data is secure and looked after in the correct and proper fashion. Okay, which is much easier than it sounds. It doesn't actually mean that many changes, not really. But what you do need to understand is that any outlet, any business, any system that you use to enable you to use that data for whatever the outcome is that you need, that company, that business is a processor of yours, and it is your responsibility to make sure that they are GDPR compliant too. Now, it isn't necessarily quite as scary as it sounds because most businesses are going to become GDPR compliant. There's a few that I've heard of, particularly in America, who are kind of burying their heads in the sand and going, no, it doesn't apply to us. It blinking well does, because if they don't comply to this, we cannot work with them if they are not GDPR compliant. So let me just explain that a little bit more about a processor. So for example, okay, can you see this? If not, download it and print it out, it's there. Etsy is a processor, so is PayPal. Any postage or courier company, you're sharing details, aren't you? You're sharing data here. We'll look at exactly what data is in a minute. An accountant maybe, and cloud storage. If you use and save any, maybe your accounts or any details of invoices, if you save that in the cloud, all of that falls into the processor. So you need to ensure that everywhere you're saving, everywhere you're using is GDPR compliant. Okay, if you've got your own website, website hosting also falls into this. Again, the payment processor, your postage and courier company, your accountant, your Google Analytics if you use it, Facebook Pixel, your email service provider. There's more. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just to get you thinking about, wow, I do use more processors than I realise I do. I definitely do. I'm definitely realising this. And you have to realise that it is your responsibility as the data controller. Now, I have got an added note on the, this way, Nicola. You have got an added note on here which says, if a processor is outside of the EEA, that's Europe to you and me, data transfer needs to be looked at. And if the processor is in the US, then you need to check that they are part of the EU to US Privacy Shield program. If you see that they're stating that on their website, then you're fine, but you do need to ensure that they have that there. Otherwise, you may find that you're looking for a new provider. for whatever that service is. And you can see this is a big deal. This is a European law. So if an American company suddenly decided they don't want to do this, that they're not going to comply with it, they lose all of their European customers. Not just us in the UK, but all of their European customers. Now, a note on Brexit. It has been stated categorically that we are adopting these regulations now and after Brexit. So nothing's going to change again afterwards, which is the other reason we definitely have to do it. And also, even if the regulations for the UK changed, we would still need to comply to these if you want to do any business within Europe. Okay? So don't worry about Brexit. Put that to one side. This is still all applicable. Okay, so just to confirm, what is personal data? Well, personal data is any data that can identify a data subject. So the data subject is me. It's you. It's anybody else who is a subscriber or a customer to your business. Okay, so personal data includes name, address, email address, phone number, and anything else which a person can be identified from. And that includes photographs. So if you are using photographs for testimonials, for follow-up, for social proof of your sales, and for showing off how happy a customer is, please ensure that you are keeping their consent, you are keeping the written notification you've got that you're allowed to use this, that you're keeping that record, because that is absolutely crucial under GDPR. Okay, now if you collect information about health, children's data, religious beliefs, ethnicity, political beliefs, and anything like that, that's actually classified as sensitive data, and we're not even covering that here because that goes a whole other step again. So if you do that, you need to do some research into it. Again, this is not an exhaustive list of the definitions of personal data. I'm just starting to lead you to think about this and understand actually how far-reaching it is. So, how to comply with GDPR? Well, compliance starts with understanding the data you collect, when, where you collect it and why, and this is where we start to get the scary bit, including the legal basis. So let me just qualify that. I've already said by explaining a little bit about potential processes for Etsy sellers or for anybody who sells through their website, that we have far more processes than we realise. We actually utilise data in a far bigger way than we realise. So it's about knuckling down and understanding that and actually getting a grasp on it. So we're not just willy-nilly just putting data out there without even thinking about it. Now the legal basis, they're actually not too bad. So for example, actually, first of all, there are 6 legal bases under GDPR that you can pick from for your reasons for collecting data. We are really only concerned with 3 of them. And those 3 are, number 1 is contractual. So that's fairly self-evident. If you're fulfilling an order, you're fulfilling a contract. So you're going to need a name and address to post the product out to. You need that to fulfill the contract. Okay, so that's fairly standard. Phone number, maybe if you need to chat with somebody about a few details about their personalised order, then you can argue that you need that as part of the contract. However, if you are using it as part of the contract, you cannot use that data and that information for anything else at all. You can't kind of say, oh, well, they've bought a product from me, so I'm going to give them marketing information as well. That requires a separate consent. And that brings me to number 2 on the legal basis, which is consent. Now, this is where a data subject has opted in, they've chosen to be involved in something. So from now on, you're going to see a lot more checkboxes which are tick to be in. No more checkboxes for that are pre-ticked. That's not allowed. Definitely not allowed. They're a big no-no. So that is opting in. It can be to a mailing list or, well, all sorts of things really, but mailing list is the most common one. We also have a legal basis known as legitimate interest. Now this can be your legitimate interest or that of your customer. So if there's something you have as a business need, for instance, a security plugin on your website, maybe it collects IP addresses to check against lists of people who you don't want on your website, or from a spam point of view, that's collecting personal data. That legitimate interest is for the safety and security of your business, which is also ultimately for your customers as well. But also, if somebody inquires and they ask for information from you, following that inquiry up, that's a legitimate interest. That person has shown interest in a specific product or specific range of products of yours, so you can contact them about that information. You do need to have time limits on this. You can't kind of keep that information indefinitely and just keep contacting them. It does have kind of limitations, so don't just take the mick. Do be sensible about this. We'll look at the GDPR principles in a minute and you'll see how that all falls together. So the next thing that I've put on here, because this is something that I've seen in lots of places, does GDPR mean that I can't market my business anymore? Not at all. GDPR is not designed to stop marketing. It is just there to protect data subjects and to ensure they know exactly how their data is used and to give them the choice and the opportunity to opt out. So my sentence in the next bit is, as long as you follow the GDPR principles and guidelines, you can still build email lists and send emails. You can still retarget through advertising. You can still use Google Analytics to examine how your Etsy and website is working and more. No limitations as long as we are transparent and we tell the visitors to our website that this is what we're doing. We tell our subscribers to our email list that this is what we're doing. All of this has to be covered in our privacy statement and our cookie notices. Okay, so before we go any further and panic about privacy notices, because I know that that's the next step, I do want to cover the principles of GDPR. I am aware I'm racing through this. This document is here. There's a million pieces of information out there about GDPR. This is the bare bones of everything you need to know, okay? Anybody else tells you anything else, come back to this because these are the principles. So, the first principle is lawfulness, fairness and transparency. So the important part here is you're not breaking the law with their details. You're not going to sell it off and do horrible things with it. You're being fair, okay? And the most important one there is transparency. The transparency is, as I've just said, it's telling them exactly how their data is going to be used. Now, this information is going to be available to people in your privacy policy. It's going to be available to visitors to your website if you've got a website through your cookie notice as well, so they're agreeing and accepting all the information that's in there. If they choose not to read it, that's their choice. But we have to provide this information so that they have the option to make the decision about, am I staying on this website? Am I happy with how it's going to use my data? Do I want to subscribe to this email list? Am I happy with how they're going to use my data? Okay, so it's all about transparency. Then we have purpose limitation. Now this is about limiting to that purpose. I've said it before, if somebody buys from you, you can't then just start marketing to them completely. You have to know that you've collected it for that purpose and keep it for that purpose only. We then have data minimization. Data minimization is basically not asking for more information than you actually need. So, when somebody signs up to my mailing list, all I really need is the email address. I like to have the first name as well because I just think it's really nice to be able to say, hello, Nicola, or whatever your name is, because that's a really friendly thing to do. But I have absolutely no need for a date of birth. I have absolutely no need to know your dress size. None of that is relevant. So just making sure you're only asking for the information you really, really do need. Okay, because every extra piece of information is potentially going to get you into trouble. Then we've also got accuracy. Under GDPR, there is a big, I've lost the word that I want to use, but accuracy is really, really important. It's, if somebody's information is wrong, they have the right to ask you to change it. And you have to put it right within a specific amount of time, which off the top of my head I can't remember what that is, but it's more than reasonable. And hey, we're going to do it reasonably as well, aren't we? Because we can. As sole traders, primarily, we can adjust, we can be flexible, and we can make these changes quite easily. So please don't worry about them. But it does mean that if somebody comes along and says, oh, you've got my name wrong, you're going to go and change it. Okay? You're going to make sure that you kind of like you're sending to the right address that they've done with the order. You do that anyway. Okay, the point is this is just formalising this now. It's just making it much more structured. The reason the Data Protection Act is changing is the existing Data Protection Act is pre the internet. It's pre-Facebook, okay? Does that tell you how outdated it is? So this is now bringing catching up, really. It's just catching up with everything we do online every single day and giving us that protection that we want. Okay, so another principle. There are 6 of these. We've done 4. The other principle is storage limitation, and this is only keeping the data for as long as you need to. Okay, again, why do you want to keep 10, 15 years worth of data if you don't need to? It's just taking up space, isn't it? Now, we do have obligations for HMRC, for self-assessment, for VAT, for, I don't know, legal responsibility to ourselves for if anybody wanted to come back and make a claim against us. So we do have certain information that we do need to keep for, 6, 7 years. But other than that, we do not need to keep anybody's data. Okay? So just limit it. Just be mindful of the fact that you don't need to keep this. On your mailing list, have an annual refresh. Go through it and double check and make sure, does everybody want to hear from you? That's storage limitation. And then we have integrity and confidentiality. Well, confidentiality is surely a given. You don't go talking about your customers and your subscribers to anybody else. It's something that we owe to, as a professional, we owe to our customers and subscribers. I keep using those words, to our data subjects. That's not a nice word though, is it? It's not a nice phrase. So, yeah, just managing our business with integrity and confidentiality. Again, it's not difficult, it's common sense, it makes sense, and an awful lot of the GDPR is that. So please, please don't panic. Now you can see in there that there's been nothing about storage boxes, there's nothing about lock boxes, nothing about locked filing cases, filing cabinets even. Now, the sensible thing with that is, yes, make sure that you're not just leaving things on a train, that you're not just taking people's data out willy-nilly. Before now, I've been known to go and work in, my kids are older now, but when they were young enough for soft play, I went and worked in a soft play. Make sure you're not going to leave any data there if you do that as well, okay? It's that kind of thing you've got to be really, really sensible for. If other people use your computer, if it's a shared computer, then yes, put passwords on your user account so that somebody can't just go in and access that data. You don't have to go overboard, you just need to be sensible, okay? So let's look at this GDPR to-do list. Now we know all of that background information. Here is our to-do list. It's not that bad. It's not that long, is it? Okay, so first of all, we go back to the very beginning that we started to talk about, which is figure out when and where you collect your data and why you collect it, including the legal basis. Now, the tip is that you keep this record somewhere so you know exactly what it is that you're doing. So set yourself up a GDPR folder. What an excuse to go to a stationery shop, eh? Okay, so now, this one, if I'm in all honesty, kind of goes, whoa, panic, and freaks me out a little bit. Till I went through a privacy policy. Now, on this list, there's a link to a privacy policy that I recommend. It's a free one that you can use. Going through that actually really helped qualify in my mind everywhere that I use and why I use data. Okay, so that really, really helped. So if you're kind of getting a bit, I don't know, go through a privacy policy and pull those pieces of information out. I might even just use my privacy policy as that for knowing why I've got my legal basis. What we need to remember with GDPR, the ICO, that's the Information Commissioner's Office, who regulate GDPR and data, they're very much running this with a carrot, not a stick approach. If you can prove, should you need to, it's unlikely, but should you need to, if you can prove that you've put everything in place that you think you need to do, if it's not perfect, they're going to give you advice and explain to you, well, actually, could you do this, please? They're not going to come along and give you a big slap on the wrist, unless, of course, you have done something that bad, okay? I'm talking minor infringements here of not having quite understood the guidelines correctly. I'm not talking about that you've taken your whole mailing list of 5,000 people and sold it off for, I don't know, insurance scams or whatever else, who knows? So we're not talking that kind of issue, but minor issues, if it's kind of you're not quite right, you're just going to get a piece of advice about it, okay? So I'm actually thinking I might just use my privacy policy and make sure that everything's covered in there. We then need to make sure that all processes are GDPR compliant. So we talked about all the processes before. Have a think and see if there's anybody else out there. Remember, it even includes people like accountants, okay? Your website hosting, your cloud storage, all of that. Tip with cloud storage. If you're using a free cloud storage like Dropbox, that is not GDPR. Dropbox for business that you pay for is GDPR compliant. So if you are using Dropbox or any of those services, be mindful of the fact that actually do you want to store that data? Personal data. Remember, we're not talking about your product photos here, your product descriptions. We're not talking about that kind of information. We're talking invoices. We're talking anything that's got data subjects, data included. Okay, so if you don't want to be paying for something, just adapt the way that you're working. So yeah, I've put a link on here for the Mailchimp processor agreement. Now Mailchimp I'm actually quite impressed with for this side, that you go in and put your name in, your email address, your business name in, and they email you a personalised document that you can print out and keep. It covers everything you need to know. I know Etsy are currently starting to make their changes with their privacy statement came out this week, and a few other things are happening. So hopefully they'll have that information at hand for us very, very soon. A few other places are a little bit slower off the ball. If you have a WordPress website, they have an update coming out on the 15th of May, which should help with some of this as well. I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head. If we remember all the way back to the consumer contract regulations in 2013, all of these businesses fought tooth and nail against it as much as they could and took it right up to the wire then as well. So I'm not surprised that they're doing exactly the same again. Okay, so don't panic about it. If we're not perfect by the 25th of May, no one's going to come knocking on your door as long as you are making progress and you are getting there and you know that things are in progress to happen. Okay, if we're relying on processors, say Etsy, maybe if they only release something on the 24th of May, it's a major rush for us to be ready on the 25th, isn't it? So let's just relax a little bit and know that these people cannot afford to lose all of their European customers. Okay, if they are players like that, let's just trust them a little bit. But be mindful of the fact if they don't comply, ultimately we do have to leave them. Okay, so that's making sure your processes are compliant. We then have cookie notices if you've got one on a website. You need to ensure that's compliant. Again, that WordPress update that's due on the 15th of May should really, really help with that. Because things like Facebook Pixel, it uses a cookie. Things like Google Analytics uses a cookie. Even things like WooCommerce use cookies because they store basket details from a person's visit once to another time. Okay, so even that's cookies. All sorts of things. Anything really that makes your visitors' experience better on your website is a cookie. Okay, so we then have update of privacy policy. Okay, now this is probably the biggest task, or one of the biggest tasks out there that you're going to have to do. It took me probably the best part of 2 hours to work through my privacy policy. I've downloaded a free one from SEQ Legal. Fully recommend it. The downside, if you call it that, for being free is it does say that it's been created by SEQ Legal. It's their copyright, and that's absolutely fine by me because I'm more than happy to recommend them. If you don't want that, if you want to take that away, there's a £10 charge from them. So it's still not extortionate and it's well worth doing. It's about going through it. It's about they put everything in square brackets that you need to adjust or change or just tweak to put your information in or choose which version of it should be. So yeah. Mine's well underway. There's a few little things I still need to check out. But yeah, privacy policy, that is one of your top priorities to get done sooner rather than later and before the 25th of May. Now, if you have an email list, if you have an email service provider and you have sign-up forms on your website that you use or even on social media, you now need to make sure that those sign-up forms are GDPR compliant. This means not having any pre-tick boxes, not that we do with Mailchimp, but it does mean if you go into your list and you go into settings, you can now tick a GDPR box and it comes up with, it now adds some extra tick boxes to your form. The only issue with this at the moment is you cannot use this on embedded forms. They have to be forms that are hosted by Mailchimp, so you use their URL, or landing pages that are hosted by Mailchimp, or you can do it with the pop-up Mailchimp code as well. Now on here, what I have done is there's a link to a video on my YouTube channel this is how I intend to use Mailchimp using Mailchimp pop-ups. So it will just very gently show you how I'm using Mailchimp with pop-up forms. Disclosure. The way I've said it in that video is how I'm using it on my new website. My website's having a revamp in the background. As it stands right now, if you visit handcraftedbusiness.com and you click the free book and subscribe link, it will actually go to a Mailchimp landing page, purely because I don't want to faff on the one that's there right now. It was easier just to do that, but in the future I will be using the pop-ups, which is the one that's in the video. If you want to use the landing page, ask me or ask a question in the group and I can show you about that as well. Okay, so the other big job, and the one that really is causing freakouts for people, is getting Reconsent for your mailing list. So if you've got a mailing list already, if you've already collected a list of subscribers and you send emails out, you do need to get their Reconsent. Okay, so if you remember the legal basis, we had contractual. They haven't signed, it's not a contractual reason they've signed up to you. If it's not legitimate interest, technically you might be able to argue that one, but really consent is a mailing list. So one of the really important things when it comes to consent is you need to be able to prove it and you need to be able to track it. So if, and this is unlikely, if your way that people signed up was originally GDPR compliant, okay, then all you actually need to do is send them a new copy of your privacy policy and bingo, it's all done and dusted. You don't actually need Reconsent. But for you to know that it's GDPR compliant, you have to know that the method that they signed up was GDPR compliant, so they knew exactly what it was that they were signing up for. It was completely transparent and all the information that they needed was there. 2, you need to be able to know exactly when that was and where it was and how it was. Okay, so one of my wonderful ladies in the Handcrafted Business Members Club actually has a whole lot of people that already are GDPR compliant, and this is because she collects email addresses from her events, and when she comes she puts them into groups on Mailchimp, and they are in groups that references that event, so she knows exactly where they came from, she knows the conversation she had with them, so all she has to do now is send them a new copy of her privacy policy when that is updated and ready to go. Those people do not need to resubscribe. So if you're in that circumstance, hey, brilliant, well done. If you're like me, and actually you've changed your sign-up form a million times, you've changed various other things in the background, and you don't know which person signed up to which sign-up form, then actually you're going to have to go down the Reconsent route. Now this means basically sending out, you've probably already seen them from other businesses, this means sending out an email which basically says, yes, I want to stay, no, I don't want to, and the other option is they're going to ignore it completely. Okay, so what I've done is I have another video, which is again linked to on this form, which is how to get Reconsent using Mailchimp. Sadly, Mailchimp haven't made this as easy as we were hoping that they would. The easiest way, the simplest way, well, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can start a new list and ask people to sign up to a new list in a brand new form. But if you want them to stay on the existing list, then popping them into groups is the best thing. So a group for yes and a group for no. And then you're going to have to segment it down. It's in that video, so don't panic. You segment it down, your yeses stay, your nos get deleted. And then you're also going to have to delete anybody who doesn't take action as well before the 25th of May. Yes, you're going to lose people. But if you've done a good job with your mailing list, then your loyal subscribers, the people who really want to hear from you, your true potential customers, will be sticking with you. And actually, that's going to make your open rates go through the roof, because anybody who doesn't open, who can't be bothered anymore, is going to disappear to the wayside. So ultimately, let's see it as a good thing. Yeah? Yeah, I'm convincing myself there as well. But hey, it has to be a good thing. We're better to have a small, well-targeted, quality email list than we are to have a massive one that just nobody's interested. Okay, so it is far, far better that way. So that's your Reconsent. Now, the other thing, this is the last one now, you'll be glad to hear on your to-do list, is you need to check if you need to register as a data controller. Now, this is one that's kind of slipped under the net previously. There's always been a data controller registration fee of £35. I've been exempt, and you've probably been exempt too. The way I know that I'm exempt is that the ICO have a tool, a questionnaire. It's an online self-assessment. There you go, let's call it that. It's an online self-assessment which you go through, tick yes or no to particular answers, and it tells you at the end whether you are exempt or not. And I am currently exempt. Now, they've changed this fee. The old fee has been scrapped, and from the 25th of May, a new fee comes in. Surprise, surprise, it's gone up. So it's now £40, but if you pay by direct debit, it's got a £5 discount. So basically the same, but not. Now, reading through their information, which there's a handy link to here on the checklist, reading through that information, I'm concerned that lots of us are now going to have to pay this instead of being exempt. However, before you panic, I'm holding fire completely on that judgment. It's a concern. I'm not stating it's fact, okay? They will be putting out a new tool. It says that in their information. They will be putting out a new self-assessment tool. As soon as that is available, I will be going through it and hoping that I'm still exempt. If not, then I'm afraid we do need to register as data controllers. Okay, I know that's not the greatest news in the world, and I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you are better to know than not know, okay? So yeah, keep your fingers crossed that when the self-assessment comes out that actually we're all exempt again, because we just don't do enough with our data. And I don't think we do really. So that is the most important sheet that you want. That's the GDPR to-do list. Now, of course, there are other things you can be doing. Of course, there are other things that people are shouting out about there. But if you do that, you are going to be as good as you pretty much need to be with the size of businesses that we are. Now, if you're the BBC, if you're Virgin, if you're Lloyds Bank, if you're any of these huge big companies, I don't know, Selfridges and Harrods and John Lewis and anybody like this, they have a far, far, far bigger task on their hands, okay? They have to employ somebody whose complete job is to oversee this. It's part of the GDPR. They have to have that. We don't, okay? The ICO does have some level of understanding, and as long as we are not abusing our customers and our subscribers and everybody whose personal data that we collect, as long as we are following those principles, as long as we aren't getting people to opt in with a pre-ticked box, as long as we can prove when people signed up to us, then we're pretty much going to be covered. That's one thing I forgot to mention. Okay. Data subjects under GDPR do have enhanced rights. They have these new rights, and these are really, really important. And we do need to make sure we can cover these. They have the right to be forgotten, and that's the big, big one. The right to be forgotten means that all data has to be deleted. Obviously, there are certain pieces of data that you need to keep for the purpose of running your business. But anything that is personal data does need to be deleted, is keeping the bare absolute minimum. Okay, so for example, if you need to keep your books and somebody's asked to be deleted, what do you do? Well, you keep the order number, you keep the details, but you lose their address, you lose their name, that kind of stuff. Now, our processors should be putting tools in place to enable us to do this. They have an obligation to do this. Remember, it's not just us, it's them as well. So we have the right to be forgotten. That's got to be done. They have the right to access the information. Previously, we've been allowed to make a charge for this, an admin charge. We cannot anymore. This information has to be freely given. There is a caveat in there that if somebody keeps asking and asking and asking, and it becomes a bit ludicrous really, then actually we can adapt that a little bit. But if somebody just asks once and will know all the details that you've got on them, you have to respond within a specific period of time, which has slipped my mind. So I do need to check that one out. But you do have to respond within a particular period of time. Again, this information has to be in your privacy policy. And if you download the one that I've recommended from SEQ Legal, it's already there. You just need to tweak it a little bit to make sure it's personal to your business. And the other one is on this sheet, because it slipped out of my mind, is the right to complain. Okay, so all data subjects have the right to complain to the ICO, and it's if somebody complains to the ICO that you're really going to start to notice the fact if you're not compliant, okay? But again, all this is in our privacy policies. I fully recommend you download the one from SEQ Legal. It's not easy reading, it's not easy to go through. Either do it in sections, or just sit down and close your doors, close everything else off, switch off social media and sit down and go through it. And if you don't understand one section, move to the next and move to the next, because I promise you, as I went through it, certain things went, oh yeah, that means that. And it kind of all connects the dots. If you understand the principles, if you understand the fact that there's 3 legal bases that we're working from, then actually you should be fine with this. Okay, so, whoa, that was meant to be a really, really quick video, and we're over half an hour. So, just to let you know, in this group, feel free to answer questions. I'm a very busy lady. I'll do my best to answer them. What I am planning on doing, though, is either next week or the week after, is doing a live Q&A session where we will I will do my best to answer the questions that you have going. Okay, so I'll get a date sorted for that and let you know. Okay, I really, really hope that's helped. I know there's work to do. I know there's a lot to get your head around and understand. But actually, as long as we follow those principles, as long as we only collect the data that we absolutely need to collect, and as long as we're really sensible with it, it's all good. Okay, speak to you soon.